parents insisted, "You're being cruel." And I realized boundaries always feel cruel to people who had none. My dad's face was going red in that way it always does before he really lets loose, the vein in his temple pulsing like it had its own heartbeat. My mom had her arms folded so tightly across her chest that her knuckles were white, blinking too fast like she was trying not to cry. They were both standing in my hallway because I hadn't let them past the front door yet. Behind me, from the living room, I could hear Bluey playing and my daughter's little laugh. This bright sound that felt like it was coming from another universe. My hands were sweaty around the doorknob, and I kept my body angled just enough that they couldn't see past me. "You're not taking her today?" I repeated, softer this time, because my throat was dry. "I've already told you that. We're not doing overnights. Not yet." Mom's voice went high and thin. "She's our granddaughter," she said, like I'd somehow forgotten. "We raised you. We know what we're doing. What do you think we're going to do? Sell her on the black market?" Dad snorted like that was hilarious. "This is ridiculous, Amelia," he said. "You're being cruel. That's what you're doing. Cruel." He spat the word like a seed. "After everything we did for you, you're dangling that child above our heads like a punishment." It was a Sunday afternoon, the first properly warm day we'd had in weeks. If it had been up to me, I would have spent it at the park, watching my kid conquer the slide and maybe drinking an iced coffee, not refereeing my parents in my hallway like I was 15 again and they just barged into my room. They were supposed to take my daughter, Ellie, to the zoo for the day. It had been planned for weeks. I'd been anxious about it, but my therapist had said, "If you want to test the waters, you can always start with a few hours, short visits, and very clear limits." So I'd made a plan. They'd pick her up at 10, bring her back by 2, no yelling, no undermining my rules. I typed it all out, sent it in a message, even though it felt weirdly formal to text your own parents like that. Then, last night, Mom called at almost midnight, wine-slurred and giddy, asking if they could just keep her overnight after. "We'll bring her back Monday. You can sleep in." I'd said no. Dad had grabbed the phone and said, "Don't be ridiculous. We raised 3 kids just fine." I could hear him already getting worked up. Ellie was asleep in the next room. My chest had gone tight. I said no again and hung up. So they showed up today 30 minutes early, suitcases in the boot, fully expecting I'd cave when I saw them. When I didn't, we ended up here in the doorway, my dad calling me cruel while I tried to remember how to inhale. Standing there, half blocking my own parents from my own child, I had this weird double vision. I could see them how they see themselves. Doting grandparents, unfairly maligned, only wanting to take their granddaughter to see some giraffes. And I could also see the highlight reel of my own childhood. Dad driving too fast with us in the back seat after a fight, slamming doors so hard the frames shook. Mom crying into my hair at 2 a.m. about how she couldn't do this anymore, and then yelling at us the next day for leaving crumbs on the counter. "You're not being punished," I said, though I knew they wouldn't hear it. "I'm being careful. That's all." "Careful?" Dad echoed, like it was the most offensive word he'd ever heard. "Careful from your own parents." He looked at Mom. "Hear that? We're dangerous now." Mom sniffed. "This is your therapist," she said. "She's putting ideas in your head, turning you against us. You used to trust us." I almost laughed because that was the moment it clicked in my brain. They really thought what I was doing was cruelty. They really genuinely believed that saying, "No, you can't have unlimited access to my child," was some kind of violence. Of course they did. No one ever set a boundary with them in their entire lives. Their parents barged in, took over, demanded, expected. They called it family. They called it love. "I'm not trying to be cruel," I said as calmly as I could. "I'm trying to protect my kid. And myself." They stared at me like I just told them the sky was green. I'm 31. For almost all of those 31 years, my parents have treated me like an extension cord, something to plug into whenever they needed more power. If I wasn't actively supplying them with validation, help, or crisis management, I was distant or ungrateful. It's taken me a long time to realize most of what I considered normal family stuff was not normal. Growing up, we didn't have doors so much as suggestions. My dad never knocked. ever. If I closed my bedroom door, it was, "What, are you hiding something?" And then the handle would turn and he'd be in the room. I learned to change clothes in the bathroom and do homework at the kitchen table just to avoid the hassle. Privacy in our house was selfishness. Alone time was sulking. Asking, "Can we talk about this later?" was disrespect. Mom would go through my things because I worry. She'd open my drawers, read my journals, scroll through my old Nokia messages while I was in the shower. If she found something even remotely emotional, a sad lyric, a frustrated scribble, she'd confront me with it in this hurt tone. "Why didn't you tell me you felt like this?" she'd ask, holding up my own words like evidence. "How can you write these things and not talk to me? I'm your mother." After that, I stopped writing. Not because I didn't need to anymore, but because there was nowhere safe to put anything. Feelings, thoughts, boundaries, they all ended up either under someone else's microscope or shoved so deep down I forgot they were there until they showed up as stomach aches and migraines. Anger didn't exist in our house unless it was my dad's. If he yelled, that was stress. And everyone loses their temper sometimes. If mom snapped, that was hormones. And we put her through so much, you kids don't even realize. If we, me, my brother, my sister, raised our voices, that was disrespect. We were talking back, answering, giving attitude. The punishment wasn't a calm conversation. It was being shouted over, grounded, or ignored for days. The silent treatment was my dad's favorite move, and it hurt worse than the yelling. At least with yelling you knew where you stood. When I was 13, I told Mom I didn't want to go hug Uncle Mark because he smelled like beer and I didn't like the way he patted my back. She grabbed my arm so tight her nails dug in and hissed, "Don't you dare embarrass me. He's family. Give him a hug." So I did. That moment lives in my body like it happened yesterday. It wasn't that Uncle Mark did anything bad afterward. It's that I learned my discomfort was less important than an adult man's feelings. That message was everywhere. Mom would complain about her friends to me, then insist I act warm and enthusiastic when they visited. Dad would rant about his boss at dinner, then expect me to nod and agree and reassure him he was in the right, even when I didn't fully understand what he was talking about. I became really good at leaving myself to keep other people comfortable. Fast forward to my 20s. I moved out, got my own place, and thought, this is it. I'm free. No one barging into my room, no one reading my texts, except my phone might as well have been an umbilical cord. Mom would call me at 11:30 p.m. and start with, "I know it's late, but I just can't sleep," and then unload about Dad. Dad would call on his lunch break to complain Mom was always whining, and why was she bothering me with her problems, like he hadn't just done the same thing. If I didn't pick up, I'd get a string of messages. "Are you okay? Call me." Then, "Wow, ignoring your own mother." Then, "I could be dead in a ditch and you wouldn't know." I lived in a constant low-level hum of anxiety that I didn't recognize as anxiety because it was the same hum I'd had my whole life. If my phone buzzed, my chest tightened. If I saw Mom's name light up the screen, my stomach dropped. Enter Ellie. I didn't exactly plan on getting pregnant when I did. My ex and I were together 4 years, off and on, and broke up for good when Ellie was 1. He moved overseas. I became, for all intents and purposes, a single mom. My parents were thrilled about becoming grandparents. Like genuinely thrilled. They bought baby clothes, they came to the hospital, they cried when they held her. Mom kept saying, "I finally get a second chance," which at the time I thought was sweet. Now it feels heavier. At first, having them so involved was a relief. Sleep-deprived, sore, overwhelmed, I leaned on whoever offered help. Mom would come over and clean my kitchen, rock Ellie so I could shower. Dad would assemble furniture and make jokes about how, "This place is a shoebox, but it'll do." But very quickly, the old patterns came back. Mom would take Ellie out of my arms without asking. "Here, you're doing it wrong," she'd say when I fumbled with a diaper. If Ellie cried and I didn't respond fast enough, Mom would swoop in with, "See, she needs her nana. She knows who really looks after her." If I said, "Hey, please don't give her sugar yet," Dad would laugh and slip her a bit of ice cream. Grandparents' privilege, he'd wink, while Mom snapped a photo. The first time I said the word boundary out loud to them, it was about nap times. Ellie was 18 months and a gremlin when overtired. They wanted to keep her past her nap to spend more time. I said no. Mom's face fell. So we can't even enjoy our granddaughter without a schedule now? It's not about you enjoying her, I said, bouncing Ellie on my hip. She gets overstimulated. Then she's up screaming all night. We have to stick to her nap. Dad rolled his eyes. You're too soft with her, he said. Kids should fit around adults, not the other way around. Our generation didn't have all these rules. Yeah, I said, before I could stop myself. I noticed. That earned me a lecture about respect that lasted 45 minutes. They left in a huff. Mom texted later, we're just trying to help. You're pushing us away. I started seeing a therapist when Ellie was 2 because I was terrified I was going to repeat everything. I'd catch myself snapping at her for small things. Hear my dad's phrases coming out of my own mouth. Don't give me that tone, I said once to my toddler and wanted to actually vomit. Therapy was like someone handing me glasses after years of squinting. Suddenly I could see all the weird distortions I'd assumed were just how things are. My therapist asked, do you feel like your parents respected your boundaries growing up? And I literally laughed. What boundaries? I said. She didn't laugh. That was the first time I felt the word in my chest. Oh, we talked about enmeshment, about how my parents treated my emotions like communal property, about how I'd become the default emotional support adult in our house far too young. We talked about how I constantly overrode my own discomfort to keep the peace. So what do you want for Ellie that you didn't have? She asked one session. I want her to know her body is hers, I said. That she can say no to hugs. That her feelings aren't up for debate. That being mad at me is allowed. That she doesn't have to fix me. Then you're going to have to protect that, she said. Which, in your family system, is going to feel disruptive. Disruptive was an understatement. The first time I told Ellie, in front of my parents, you don't have to hug anyone if you don't want to, Mom actually gasped. Ellie had just ducked behind my leg when Mom said, give Pop a kiss. Mom forced a laugh. Don't be silly. She wants to hug us, she said. Ellie shook her head. It's okay, baby, I said. You can wave instead if you want. Dad's face darkened. So we're not allowed to hug our own granddaughter now? He said. You're allowed to ask, I said. My heart was racing. She's allowed to say no. Later that night, I got a long, furious text about how I was turning my child into one of those precious snowflakes, and how I was accusing them of being predators. I wasn't, but in their minds, anything less than full access felt like an accusation. It escalated from there. I stopped answering late-night calls. I said, I can't talk about Dad with you, Mom. You need to take that to a friend or a therapist. I said, I'm not comfortable with you shouting in front of Ellie. If you start yelling, we will leave. Every time, I felt like I was peeling off my own skin. Every time they reacted like I'd stabbed them. You're being dramatic. You're brainwashed. You're cruel. That last one came today, in my hallway, over a zoo trip and a sleepover. From their perspective, I get it. No one ever told them no. My grandparents were old school. Kids should be seen and not heard. You owe your parents everything, etc. My parents grew up with no privacy, no emotional safety, no language for boundaries. When they wanted to close a door, they were told they were ungrateful. When they tried to say no, they got hit or shamed. So now when I say no, it sounds to them like abuse, like rejection, like cruelty. That doesn't mean I'm going to stop. Back in the hallway, Dad was still glaring at me. Just say it, he said. You think we're bad grandparents? I shook my head. I think you're grandparents who don't understand what I'm trying to do, I said. And I think until you show me you can respect what I'm asking, I'm not comfortable with overnights. That's it. Mom's eyes filled again. We made mistakes with you, she said. We know that. But this is vindictive. Behind me, I heard little feet on the floor. Ellie appeared at my side, clutching her stuffed bunny, hair wild from the couch. "Nana?" she said, peeking around my legs. Mom's face transformed. "My baby!" she cooed, reaching out. "Come here, darling." Ellie pressed into my hip instead. "We go zoo?" she asked, looking up at me. My throat tightened. "Not today, honey," I said, smoothing her hair. "We'll go another time, okay? We'll go together." Her bottom lip wobbled for a second. Then she nodded, accepting it far more easily than the adults were. Dad saw it and seized his chance. "See what you're doing," he said, gesturing. "Breaking her heart. For what? Your precious boundaries." For a second, guilt flooded me so hard I swayed. I could picture the alternate scene. Me smiling, saying, "Of course, take her." Swallowing my anxiety, spending the day cleaning and worrying and imagining every worst-case scenario. That's the version of me they're used to, the one who performs calm while internally screaming. Then I thought about the time Dad took my brother on a fun drive, when they were fighting and sped down the highway at 150, braking at the last minute just to teach him a lesson. I thought about Mom crying in the passenger seat, telling him to slow down while he laughed. I thought about how, last month, when he got frustrated with Ellie for tipping her juice over by accident at their place, his voice went sharp enough that she burst into panic tears, and how I had to take her into the bathroom and rock her while she sobbed, her whole body stiff with fear. I thought about being 6 and sitting at the top of the stairs listening to them scream at each other, feeling like if I just loved them harder, they'd stop. And I thought, my job isn't their comfort anymore. My job is hers. And mine. "No," I said again, more solid this time. "We're not doing this today. You can stay for a bit and have a cup of tea, or you can go. Those are the options." Dad stared at me like he didn't recognize the person in front of him. Mom's mouth trembled. "You are being cruel," she whispered. Ellie tugged my shirt. "Can I have snack?" she asked. The absurd normalcy of it cut through everything. "Yeah, baby," I said. "Go sit down." "I'll bring it." She trotted back to the living room. I turned back to my parents. "I'm going to make her something," I said. "If you want to stay, calm down. If you can't, please leave. I won't argue about this anymore." Then I did something I've never done in my life. I turned my back on them in the middle of a confrontation and walked away. My legs felt like jelly. I half expected a hand to grab my arm. My name barked at my back. It didn't come. In the kitchen, I mechanically pulled out crackers and cheese, hands still shaking. I could hear muffled voices in the hall, Mom's higher pitch, Dad's low rumble. The front door clicked. Then silence. They'd left. For a moment I just stood there, one hand on the fridge door, staring at the empty hallway. Part of me was 8 years old again, sure that now some terrible punishment would follow. Another part of me felt light, not happy. My chest still ached, but lighter, like I'd put down a bag I didn't know I was carrying until my shoulders stopped hurting. "Snack," Ellie called. "Coming," I said. I carried the plate out and sat with her on the floor, watching her make a mess of the crackers, half of them ending up in the couch cushions. She babbled about Bluey and the zoo and her stuffed bunny's birthday. "You sad, Mama?" she asked at one point, touching my face with a cracker dust-covered hand. "A little bit," I admitted. I'm trying hard not to lie to her about emotions. "But I'm okay. Are you sad?" She thought about it, then shook her head and shoved another cracker into her mouth. Later, when she was napping, I sat at my kitchen table and just shook. My phone was on the table, dark. No barrage of messages yet, but I knew they were coming. I opened my notes app and wrote, "Boundaries always feel cruel to people who had none. Doesn't mean they are." I stared at the sentence for a long time. This is the part nobody tells you about healing and breaking cycles. Stomach aches, shaking hands, the way your brain screams you're evil every time you choose a different path. Instagram makes it look like affirmations and candles. In reality, it feels like you're the one ripping the family photographs in half. I know my parents had it rough. I know their parents were worse. I know they genuinely believe they did better, and in some ways they did. We always had food. We were never hit so hard we bruised where people could see. They came to school plays. They said, "I love you" out loud. They also treated us like emotional support animals. They also taught us that no is cruelty and yes is the price of admission. I don't hate them. I cried after they left, not just from relief, but from grief. Grief for the parents I wish I had, for the grandparents I wish Ellie could have, for the version of me that could hand her over without worrying she'd be shaped by the same chaos. But I am done making myself the sacrifice to keep them from ever feeling deprived. Maybe one day they'll understand that my boundaries aren't punishment. They're the terms under which I'm even able to have them in my life at all. Maybe they won't. Maybe we'll drift, text only on holidays, become those families you hear about in other people's stories. We just don't talk much. Right now, I'm focusing on smaller things. Taking my kid to the zoo myself. Letting her say no to hugs. Teaching her that if something makes her uncomfortable, we can talk about it, and I won't tell her she's cruel for saying so. And when the guilt voice in my head, echoing my parents, says, "You're being cruel," I'm trying to answer with something my therapist said: kindness includes you, too.